All right. Let me see what I need to do to seal your beautiful faces.
Yes.
Not yours. I'm talking to you. Show video panel. All right, here we go. So, handling situations. As always, a couple quick rules and expectations for today. Out of respect for everyone's time and learning experience, please leave your microphones off until you're ready to speak. If you have comments or additions, please place those in the chat and we'll address those as necessary. Jake is going to monitor the chat, but that just makes the screen or this presentation go a little bit quicker, smoother, and make sure that we get everybody out on time to go back to work, which we are all excited for. So, like I said, questions or comments, drop them in the chat. We'll address those. My email is listed there. Feel free to reach out if you have any rules or mechanics questions that you may have. We are theoretically a week away from starting high school baseball in South Dakota, I believe, if the weather cooperates, which who knows? We'll see. So, first off, handling situations. So, the most common situation that's going to occur during a baseball game is with coaches and catchers. We talked a lot last week about dealing with catchers, so I'll be kind of short with that. But diffusing situations with coaches. Coaches come out and ask a question on a play. The best thing to do is just ask them questions in return, especially when they're upset. If you can get them to focus on being coherent with what they're saying to you and thinking it through and answering a question, a lot of times their demeanor or their pucker factor will go down because now they have to stop and think about what they're saying and make sure they're explaining it to you correctly as they saw it. And coach comes out to me and they're in a calm, collected manner. Typically I just say, "Hey, what do you got?" I'm a big first name guy with coaches because I think it shows respect that I take the time to know who they are, and I want to be called by my first name. So if I use their first name and they start calling me Blue, say, "Hey, Jeff, my name's Connor. Please use it." And that usually kind of helps smooth things along a little bit there. But with coaches, really what you have to do is get down to the point of what they want or why they came out when they do come out. So the best thing to do is just ask them, and they'll walk you through it. Take the time to pause and actually listen to what they're saying. A lot of times you can tell if a coach is just out there venting or if they actually have an issue with a call based on how they present it to you. But if we don't stop and listen to what they're saying, we can't respond effectively. A lot of times we get so jacked up thinking we know why they came out that we put ourselves into a corner that we can't get out of because we think we know what they're coming out for. So always just take the time to ask them the question. I'm a big proponent, and I think Russ and Jake will agree that the best conversations are had side by side, out in the open, so that the camera catches everything. When we are side by side, we're having a conversation, and when that coach turns around and faces up with you, now everybody sees. Be very, very calm in these situations, demeanor-wise, and don't speak with your hands. When you speak with your hands, you come across as more aggressive. I also think that when at all possible, have the coach facing the backstop if they decide to get in front of your face, because then everything is going to show up on camera. Regardless of what level you're working, somebody's filming it somewhere, and it makes it a lot easier for suspensions at various levels if that shows up on film as to what they're doing. But when we get into dealing with coaches, ask questions, use rulebook verbiage, number one, and the term "in my judgment." Those are the two biggest pieces of advice. In my judgment, this is what happened. By rule, that means this equals this. In my judgment, the catcher was blocking the plate without possession of the ball when contact occurred. By rule, that's obstruction. The run scores. Everybody else gets placed effectively. By rule, or in my judgment, the pitcher's front leg, the pitcher committed to delivering a pitch and failed to do so. By rule, that's a balk, right? I think we all can practice this and get better at it because that eliminates any argument. They can't argue a judgment call, and if you know the rule, and you don't have to know, Rule 6.04 says that, or Rule 504B says that I can't grant time because the batter claims that they have dust in their eyes, right? We don't need the rule reference. We just need to know by rule, this is what happened. And typically, most rule sets are divided into the batter, the pitcher, the runner, and that's pretty much it, the fielder. So if you know rules 2, 3, 4, 5, and you know that rule 4 is the batter, rule 4 says this. Then they can go look it up and find it in rule 4. But the biggest thing, I think, is that we communicate clearly and effectively in a calm demeanor. We'll get into how to handle ejections later in the PowerPoint when necessary, but that's the best thing we can do to diffuse a situation with a coach. Is just ask questions and make sure we do our best to stay side by side. And that may mean opening up and pivoting to stand side by side and making it apparent that you are not the aggressor in the situation. If you turn and square up on a coach and get in their face, you're not going to be supported by any assigner you have, because now you're initiating that argument that led to that ejection or that led to that situation. Diffusing situations with catchers. You can use catchers to diffuse situations. You can also run into some situations like we talked about last week in handling catchers. But, you have a pitcher who's getting a little squirrely up there on the mound, walking around the mound after every pitch. Hey, Jake, go talk to him for me, would you? Below NCAA, Legion, they can use as many visits as they want. Send the catcher out to talk to the pitcher. Have them talk to the pitcher in between innings. You notice they're doing something that's borderline illegal, or they need to stop doing something. Catch them after the third out. Hey, Jake, will you do me a favor and talk to your pitcher for me? He keeps doing this, and I'm going to have to go get it if he keeps doing it.
Yeah, with coaches too.
Yeah.
You're gonna have a coach come by you every half inning, whether they're walking to the dugout or they're leaving the dugout. And just to add a couple things on to what you were saying with the coaches, page 21 of the NCAA book, and I don't have a current MLOBR book, but it was 140 in 2018, are going to contain all of your definitions. And Connor was saying, don't memorize the rule reference, one of the definitions. Starting, I believe, next week, we're going to go through the entirety of Rule 2, which is all of your definitions. So stick around for that. And as to the point about, listening to what a coach is actually asking, there is no worse feeling than, having Connor being a coach coming out, and Connor just wants to vent. And I might have had a runner's lane interference, and there's actually a great, I forget who the umpire was, but Tom Kelly, who rarely got tossed, came out and basically recited the runner's lane interference rule back to the umpire, made it look like he was venting, but he just wanted to vent and could not fathom the fact that his player could not run in the runner's lane. Well, had the umpire been ready with a question or with a response to the question right away, as to why it was runner's lane interference, that's completely irrelevant as to why Tom Kelly was out there. So, Connor's absolutely correct. When a coach comes out there, listen, figure out what it is that they're asking. And then later on, I'm going to talk about, ways to buy yourself, we'll call it thinking time. So we'll come up here in a couple slides, I think.
I would say have an idea of why they're coming out, but don't have that way you can respond. But if you ask the question, it slows them down. There have been times where I think a coach is coming out about something and I immediately stop him. Like when I was a younger umpire, I immediately stopped him and explained something to him. He's like, so that means now he's pissed off about that too, because he didn't even realize that had happened and thinks I got it wrong. And he also thinks I got the other call wrong. So now I have him twice as mad because I couldn't just shut my mouth and listen to what he had to say first. So you have 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. covert communication. So this is something that I think that we can really work on utilizing as umpires. I talked a little bit about catchers, utilizing catchers to communicate to people. Your pitcher, your center fielder who's yelling about a pitch that they think they can see from 300 feet away, but can't see when they're up at the plate, being right down the middle, right? You have a first baseman or a second baseman or shortstop who are upset on a steal play at second base. Things like that. Use your resources. Jake mentioned coaches walking by. Third base coach walks by to go to the first base dugout. I pull my lineup. If I need to address something, a lot of times I'll pull my lineup card out and just ask him a question. And just say, hey, you got a second? As I'm walking towards him with my rule book, and then my lineup card. And I said, hey, real quick, will you talk to your pitcher about this? I tried going through the catcher to address it, and it didn't work. Will you help me out here? 99 times out of 100, that coach is going to be happy you asked. And they're going to be more than willing to go out of their way to make sure that stops happening. Whether it's the pitcher up there throwing his hands up after every close pitch, whether he's, using a balk move, whether he's flinching his shoulder, your first baseman is completely in foul territory and won't listen to you. Your catcher keeps dragging pitches into the zone or something. If you talk to coaches in a way that doesn't draw attention to yourself, like asking a question about the lineup or pretending to, a lot of times they're going to go above and beyond to make sure that happens to make the game go smooth. They don't want you to call balks on their guys. They want you to call as many strikes as possible. They want the game to run smooth. And if their best players stay in the game because they can help you diffuse them, they're going to be thankful and they're going to do that. They want to make your life easy. Because if your life's easy, their life's easy.
The other thing with that too is when you go in and clean it up, it is not the phrase, the next crew will clean it up, should never be something that comes across your mind. I mean, I had a game last week where I had a pitcher who, it was one of those where it was kind of one of those balks where it was all of the above. I could have grabbed probably 5 or 6. It was a lower level game. And I made sure that the big stuff, I made sure when he was in the set position, he came set. I made sure that we didn't have any of the big ones that were very apparent and obvious. Well, coach comes out and pulls him. And so coach steps off the mound. I'm on the bases. And I just grab the coach and say, hey, he's balking here, 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 and here. Do me a favor, talk to him about it. Now, you might think, well, okay, that's irrelevant. He's potentially no longer eligible to pitch, let alone play in this game. Well, yeah, that may be true. But, the next time he's out pitching, he might have Connor working behind the plate, and Connor might go grab that balk. And then the absolute worst thing that I can do, I might not be Connor's partner for that game, but at the end of the day, we're all umpires, we're all on the same quote unquote team here. The worst thing that I can do, and I'm throwing Connor under the bus by not addressing it in my game, because as soon as Connor goes and gets that balk, we know the head coach is coming out. Well, that wasn't balk last game.
Now I'm a dick because I called what needed to be called.
So, and it's unbelievable how more clean your games get when you call stuff. If you go grab a catcher's or a batter interference right away, it cleans the game up a lot. Not just for your game, but it's going to clean up the game for the next crew that comes in. How you work a game will affect the next crew, and don't be that umpire that says, that's the next crew's responsibility.
You are the next crew from yesterday or last week or whatever the hell's going on. You are the next crew. Dan actually has a really good line about this one. I may be the first one to do it to you this year. So that means I'm just going to be the first one to be right this year. If you think about it. No one's ever done that to us this year at all. I guess I'm the first one that's right then. I don't know what to tell you. Of course, you know they're lying because that's typically what they do to try to get out of. They think it's going to get them out of today. But you are the next crew. It's the only way I can think of it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, excellent point.
I deal with it all the time when keeping players, making sure they only have one on deck batter. Nobody else does that. What other rule do you want me to ignore today?
Coaches on buckets.
One of the things they really like to do and are really good at it, they actually coach their players to play, catch the ball, run, hit the ball, all those things. That's what they do really well. They don't teach rules well. And so today we're going to have a rules clinic for you if somehow you don't change.
Yeah. Another way for covert communication, use your plate brush. I'm a big proponent of this when I have issues with catchers. Like I mentioned this last week, but not everybody is here. If I have an issue with the catcher, the first thing I'm going to do is talk while facing the pitcher. I'm not going to look at the catcher. I'm just going to talk to him. The second thing that's going to happen is I'm going to get my plate brush off, have him stay in his stance, and I'm going to go clean the plate and have a conversation with him. Usually that second one is a little more direct, but it usually gets the point across. We don't go past that. But to all anybody sees is that I'm cleaning the plate, which they never notice unless it's like covered in dirt, right? But then the moment it's covered in dirt, everybody's yelling at you to clean the plate off. It has any dirt on it. So it just looks like you're trying to make them happy and clean the plate. I do it on turf fields all the time. I use that tool and nobody knows I'm addressing the catcher. They just think I'm cleaning the plate. The way we help our credibility in diffusing situations is how we approach the plate meeting, how we approach the first through third innings, in between innings, and how we handle our business there. If you've ever worked with me, no matter what level of game I'm working, for the first 3 innings, I am just outside the dirt circle, standing right next to the foul line, counting pitches for the first 3 innings. And the moment we hit 2 left, I turn to the dugout that's coming up to bat. Hey guys, 2 left. Everybody knows I'm on top of the game. I mean business. I'm here to work. Because if they notice I'm out there paying attention to how many pitches they're throwing in between innings, they know I'm paying attention to everything else too. And it makes them, A, maybe feel a little bit more comfortable, but B, puts them on notice that Connor's here to work. He's paying attention. He knows what's going on. And then innings 4 through 7 or 4 through 9, 9 times out of 10, I don't even have to say anything. The batter's ready to go. The catcher knows he's got to count to 5 every inning. And we're ready to play baseball when we're done with our warm-up pitches. But that credibility of that, hey, I'm here to work. I mean business. I'm handling my stuff, makes the coach have a little bit more of an easy feeling of, hey, Connor's here to work. This game's going to go smooth. And putting them at ease early makes all the difference in the world for that nut cutter of a call at first base later in the game. Because they're going to come out and they're going to be like, you've been working hard all game. You've shown that to everybody. Everybody notices that. And they're going to give you a little bit more, hopefully, they're going to give you a little bit more credibility or listen to what you have to say, even though they may not agree with it. You handle your business early in the game.
My turn. Cool. All right. So I wish Dan was here, but I don't think he was able to join us today. So Russ, you might have to help me out here a little bit.
Oh, wait a minute. I don't know that I've ever heard someone say that phrase. I wish Dan was here.
Well, he was the one that pointed me to this.
Yeah.
This Verbal Judo is a book that was written by a former English teacher and cop named George Thompson. The full title of the book is called Verbal Judo, The Gentle Art of Persuasion. There's a first and second edition. The goal of the book is to speak effectively and engage with empathy. Now, that's probably not something that you would imagine, engage with empathy on a baseball field. That's probably not something that we're going to, would come to mind when we talk about umpiring. But, for me, I've had several ejections in my career. I've handled several ejections in situations very well. And I've also had some that I have not handled well, and I've learned from them. The verbal judo, it was written for law enforcement officers, and as the main group, but then it was also written towards teachers, and it was talking about how you diffuse situations. There's a couple, and I forget the term that he uses, but they're like phrases that you can use to kind of buy time. Hey, I understand if a coach is out there, Mike, I understand. Okay, Mike, I hear what you're saying, but in my judgment, as opposed to just going, in my judgment, da 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 da. Just by saying I hear you, or I understand what you're saying, but will more often than not diffuse a situation to some extent. They're still not going to be happy with the outcome because your call is not changing, but they're going to be calmed down to the point where they're staying in the game as opposed to going to sit on the bus. Connor mentioned earlier, ask questions. I would further that by saying, you can ask clarifying questions. Coaches will or go ahead, Larry.
You got these are called I phrases. When I taught health, we taught this in drug education and sex education in the classroom. And that gentle art of persuasion, a long time ago, there's Gary Cooper got not an Oscar, but he was nominated for it, called Friendly Persuasion. And it's interactions between spouses. Those of you that haven't been married or haven't been married very long, this is a great book to read. It really is really good for your relationships. And that's what we're having, a relationship with our players and our coaches. That's what we're having that day. And as you see that coach over and over again over the years, you've developed a relationship with them. So think about all these phrases that start with I. I feel what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. I understand. What can I do to help in this situation? Anyway, I think those are really good ideas.
No, they absolutely are. And the tool that I found, aside from the I words that Larry just listed off, is if a coach comes out all hot and bothered, okay. If I ask a clarifying question, it makes them stop and think, typically. And so if a coach is coming out about a forced play slide rule, coach, is this what you're asking about? Okay, because coaches, especially the lower levels, or the lower you go, coaches don't always know the rules. And so often we take on the role of educating coaches about the rules. Well, we want to make sure that they're talking about obstruction versus interference, because a lot of times these coaches get confused. So coach, you're talking about the interference at second base. Makes them stop and it makes them think. And typically it'll bring them down 2 or 3 notches. And then you can explain, coach, in my judgment, the fielder or your runner illegally slid because he did a cross-body slide. That is a forced play slide rule violation. By rule, he is out, runner's out. And I've talked the coach off a ledge. I've given him the rule. I've given him the explanation. And in most situations, he might not be happy with you, but he's not yelling at me anymore. So ask questions. I hear you. I understand. And also the reason that we listen first, 2 ears, 1 mouth, is because we want to know why they're out there. Are they out there because it's just a blowout of a game and they're trying to, they think they can do something to fix it? Or are they out there to legitimately ask a question? What's the purpose of their trip? Then you can respond accordingly. What I will do is there's actually a presentation online about verbal judo. And then I will send that. We're going to talk about standards of removal. I have the NCAA standards of removal in a Word document, and I will send a link to Amazon for those that are interested in purchasing the book Verbal Judo. Outside of this book right here, which is the minor league umpire manual, it's basically the case book, or for guys that have been around forever, the old P-Buck manual. That and Verbal Judo have probably been the 2 biggest pieces of literature that have helped me get better as an umpire.
Awesome. I think one of the other things that I find helpful in using verbal judo is explaining it back to the coach. So what I'm hearing you say is this: okay, if that's what happened, you might be right, but from the angle I had, this is what happened. And that usually gets them to understand that, hey, there's 2 different sides of this play. We had 2 different looks at it. Therefore, we're going to have 2 different opinions on it. It's not saying they're right, but it says that they might have seen it differently. It hurts that they saw it differently than what I saw it. And that usually works for me. All right. Okay, now, verbal abuse. So this takes in form. There is a lot of different options on here. There's a lot of different things that qualify as verbal abuse in the game of baseball. The term that is most commonly thrown around is bench jockeying. But verbal abuse is outlined. It's outlined as verbal abuse in every rule book. So when a coach comes out and says, well, when his team's yelling at the other team, and you say, hey, stop, tell your guys to stop, they're bench jockeying. And they say, well, that's not in the rule book. You can say, maybe not, but it is verbal abuse. Because I had a Legion coach come out and say, that's not in the rule book. And I said, yeah, it is. Just call it something different. But so in OBR, Rule 6.4, unsportsmanlike conduct is no manager, player, substitute. Basically, shall use language which will in any manner refer to or reflect upon opposing players, an umpire, or any spectator. Doesn't happen in Major League Baseball very often because they're professionals. Typically where you see stuff like this is, well, say the directing at the opposing players doesn't happen very often. Umpires, it does all the time. NCAA says that game personnel, manager, player, substitute, coach, trainer, bat boy, ball boy, whatever the case may be, shall not use language that will refer to or reflect negatively on opposing players, coaches, umpires, or spectators. They got rid of the whole orchestrated team activities by dugout personnel was a hot button topic for quite a few years in the NCAA. You have the guys with the radar guns, the guys with the snipers, the sniper long range gun, stuff like that. Screaming ball 4 or ball 5, snowball fight, stuff like that is all under the negatively reflecting on opposing players. We see this a lot at the NCAA level because players want to talk, right? and it's never the guys that are actually in the game. It's always the 6 to 10 substitutes at the end of the bench that won't see the field unless it's a 16-2 blowout. Very rarely is it the starters. It's always the bench players. NFHS has it worded essentially the same way. Use of profanity, intimidation tactics, or remarks reflecting unfavorably on any other person or taunting or baiting, or use of any language to intimidate. That's all considered bench jockeying. The penalty here for bench jockeying is to warn and then eject. Now, we have a few different methods on how we address this. The first step that I use is that covert communication with the third base or first base coach. Hey, tell those guys on the end of the bench to knock it off. Right? So once I call it bench jockeying, then according to my assigner, I had to give a warning at that point. So a lot of times it's, hey, tell them to direct their comments tell them to support their own teammates. And that usually gets the message across. And if it doesn't, then I'm going to go to the coach and say, hey, coach, tell your players to keep it in their own dugout. So now I've talked to them twice about it, right? The third step is, coach, here's your warning for bench jockeying. I'm warning your dugout. And the third step is to eject a player. Try to have an idea of who it actually is, but be smart about it as well. If Russ or Jake want to cover how to pick somebody when you have to pick somebody, I do it a little different way. Sometimes you just have to pick somebody. Sometimes it's a guy standing there in turfs, or sometimes it's a kid sitting on the bench that's injured, right?
Yeah.
Because it's somebody. That's typically who I will pick, unless somebody is just making it known who they are. Then I'm not going to help them. But if I can't pick somebody, I'm going to pick the guy that's going to impact the team the least, because it's still going to send a message. Some guys will go to the coach and say, okay, somebody's got to go. Who is it? And the coach will pick somebody. Some guys will go, hey, who threw yesterday? Because that 4-game suspension puts them back in the rotation to start game 5. And they don't really lose any time.
Actually, that yesterday's pitcher isn't in today's lineup. He's not getting 4 games.
There you go.
So that's why yesterday's pitcher is so effective.
Mm-hmm. The one thing that
gets suspended, I think it's either 1 game or 2 games, but he don't care.
Right. He's only listed as a pitcher in that game. Yeah.
Yep.
So the one thing that I'm going to add, and bench jockeying is one of those things that requires a lot of trust, and trust in your own partner. I'm going to disclose a certain situation as vaguely as possible, but I was involved in a game. It's a college game that I had the second basemen of both teams that decided that they were going to write messages in the dirt back and forth to each other. And I see Connor laughing, and he's
Lord
heard this story
Jesus.
before. And but it was it was the writing, and to use rule book, it would reflect negatively on opposing players, and it was both players doing it. And my base umpire came to me and said, hey, we need to issue bench jockeying warnings. I said, okay. I have this dugout, and because I had this team before, I knew the head coach, and it was my first time seeing the other team, and he'd had them multiple times before. So we both went our separate ways, and my coach said, I was like, what's going on? I said, there's stuff being written in the dirt that reflects negatively upon the opposing player. Both players are doing it, and I guarantee my partner's telling such and so the exact same thing. All right, both teams have been issued their bench jockeying warnings. It was not until after the game that I found out what actually was written in the dirt. Okay. Point being, my partner came to me and said, we need to do this. We went and did that. Okay. If your partner says, hey, we need to issue warnings, don't ask why. Get enough information to tell the coach and do it.
The main point I put this in there for is address this stuff, because this is how intentionally hit batters, brawls, all that kind of stuff start. If you address it when it becomes an issue and you put a stop to this, it prevents things from escalating.
Here's one thing I did one time, and I know it's not good. I told the coach to pick who it was. Well, he did. The guy wasn't there. So it has no effect on that game, and it made me look bad. So if you say, Coach, you can pick him, but show me who he is.
Point him out too.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
you gotta give me his name, and I gotta see him walk away.
Yeah, and get it written down.
Jake, let me play the other side of that coin,
Okay,
if you don't mind.
go for it.
Why would you not ask right away why? And the reason I ask that question is, if you go and we're going to cover this too in a second, if you go your opposite way, you have zero ammo in your magazine to tell the coach you're talking to about what's happening, other than just writing messages in the dirt. Because we've talked about this before, they will lie to you. And they will say, yeah, he told me they were writing, hey, he told him, hey, good turn on the double play back there. Good job. And all of a sudden, you don't have the ammo you need to be having that conversation. From your perspective, why would you not ask? I totally get, I trust my partner.
Mhm.
That's implicit. That's implicit. I get that part.
So, and I actually called you after this situation happened.
Yeah, I know.
Okay. And so I guess the specific reason for it is because my partner said, there were certain things that were written in the dirt that were not appropriate. I kind of had an idea of what it was. So I could, I don't want to use the term speculate, but I could at least get the coach to a point where, he understood what was going on. And if I remember correctly, the coach's response was, yeah, I'm not surprised.
Sure. Then the second question I have about this is, could it be more effective to bring the two head coaches to you, so you 2, 3, 4 umpires are talking to the two coaches at the same time? Nothing gets misconstrued. No one can get accused of saying something inappropriate or unacceptable. Nobody can get accused of being the aggressor. Because if you're going over to their dugout, it might look like you're being aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to watch your body language there. I say that because I've done it that way, and it worked very well for that particular set of circumstances. Why would you go to the dugout by yourself?
You make an excellent point. I guess that thought had never, remotely crossed our minds. But that is definitely something that I would do in the future, because I think that makes a lot more sense. I think there would be a certain situation, and I will say that I think after what you just said, I don't think we handled this as good as in a way that we could have, or there could have been a way that we could have handled it better, I should say. But I think that there may be a situation, and you'll know kind of the lines I'm getting to here. But there are certain coaches that do not like each other. And so I think maybe at that point in time, if you know that there have been issues before in the past, I think then that might be an appropriate situation. But, looking back at this and having the benefit of, I think this was 2 years ago, or maybe even 3 years ago, I think you're absolutely correct. I think we probably should have brought both head coaches out. To
It
address
wasn't.
it.
Yep. Hold tight. The reason for the question wasn't an indictment that it was either right or wrong on your part on the field. It was just simply, I want the group to understand there might be a different way to handle this.
Mhm.
You might very well have picked the right one. I'm not disagreeing with that. I wasn't there. I'm not telling you were wrong in front of this group. I'm just want the group to understand there might be a second way to do it.
Mhm.
It may work better. It might work worse too. You got to figure that out.
I
Go ahead,
think
Connor.
in the instance that Jake described, where the coaches are going to get after each other in the middle of it, I'm going to go with my partner to one coach and then go with my partner to the other coach, because now
That's a
I've
third way to
separated
do it. 100%.
and everybody hears the same story. If I know that all getting them together is going to stir the pot more, I'm going to address them separately with my partner. So
So
Have you ever
the one
had-
time, go ahead, Larry.
Where you've got the coach to pick somebody or you rejected somebody, and now we have to go to phase 2 of the whole problem because it's continuing. That bench jockeying is continuing. So what I had, and it was kind of a weird situation because it was Augsburg, my own alma mater, against Hamlin, and the pitcher that they were getting on was the son of a player that I played with for many years. So I've got, I end up telling him, if you don't change something here quickly, we're going to remove everybody from your bench except the players in the game, and they're going to go under the clubhouse, and we're going to, you can bring them back for substitutions, but nobody's going to be in your dugout except the players that are in the game. And we ended up getting to that point. So I removed them all, and it was an unpleasant situation. Luckily for those players that were put out, they got to get out of the wind in 35-degree temperatures. So they probably enjoyed it.
The situation I had, it was again probably 3 years ago, Jake, maybe 4 years ago. Same concept. I've got 6, 7, 8 guys in the dugout making a noise as the pitcher's pitching the ball, as he begins his delivery. One head coach comes to me, the pitching head coach comes to me and he's telling me about this, and I'm like, so let me see if I understand you. You want me to go into that dugout and tell them to be quiet. How would that work for your team? Would it work well? And he went, I don't care about my team. I control my team. I'm like, I can live with that answer. I have no issue. I said, I'll have a talk with him. I had a talk with the head coach. It was an informal discussion. It didn't stop. An inning later, the other coach comes back to me and goes, hey, I thought we had this covered. I said, all right, here's what we're going to do. Pull my partner in. Now I get 2 head coaches. We were down in Tucson. I said, look, you're from Connecticut and you're from New Mexico. I have a really hard time believing that you two have bad blood with each other. No, not at all. Not at all. I said, so you guys are going to stop this. I hear it. You know you're doing it. Your kids know you're doing it. You're going to stop it. This is your first and only formal warning. This, I think, was even before we had to do warnings. Is that clear? Do you understand? Go have a talk with your kids. Let's get back to baseball. So it stopped that. It worked that time. So.
all right. Field assistance, so dealing with fans or team dad. See if this video works. Maybe not. This is how you should handle it, essentially.
You can't triple stamp a double stamp. You can't triple stamp a double stamp, Lloyd. You can't triple stamp a double stamp. Lloyd, you got.
So, when dealing with fans, ignore as many times as you can. When it gets to be too much, find game management, ask them to escort the individual from the premises. That's the only way we deal with fans as umpires. And that's all we need to know. Ignore it. If it gets to be profane, vulgar, something like that, find game management and tell them that person needs to go and let them handle it. And usually they will handle it right away because you've asked them to. I'm not of the opinion that I'm going to sit there and wait until they leave the first time. Like you have the right to stop the game and not continue the game until that player's or that person's removed. If it's a fan, I'm probably going to say, "Hey, Jake, that guy up there in the blue hat needs to go." And Jake says, "Okay, I'll take care of it. I'm going to go back to the game and let Jake handle his business." If Jake fails to handle his business, now I might consider stopping the game until that fan is removed. But I don't know, how do you feel, Russ?
Couldn't agree more. I know of a situation again in Tucson, very early in the year, like second week of the season, so still in February, where the person I was working for was at a Arizona game, and the umpire turned around to the fans and mouthed, "You don't know anything." And it was apparently clear as day. This person that I was working for was not in the stadium in any official capacity, but is a heavy booster of the program. Happened to call that Power 5 coordinator and inform him of what happened. And that umpire was promptly removed from that series. So we don't address fans ever.
You can't triple stamp a double.
All right. Standards for removal. So the MLB has 12 standards for removal. I think there are 10 on here because 2 of them don't really apply to 99.9% of us. Leaving your position on the field to argue balls and strikes, including check swings, warnings, or balks, is a standard for removal. They can be ejected if they leave their position to argue one of these calls. I'm a big proponent of this one of you can't come out on this one and give them a chance to correct their behavior before I just immediately let them run out and dump them for it. If on the balk or a warning, they can come out and get an explanation and say, this is why he balked, or this is how he balked, or this is why the warning was issued. But if they argue it, that's grounds for an ejection. Try to prevent them from coming out if you can. Like if you can tell them, hey, it's a balk, no stop, then they come out, then it makes it pretty easy. Walk them back to the dugout or eject them. Arguing an earlier call in the game, or claiming video evidence disputes previous call on the field. So if they come out in the 5th inning talking about a call in the 1st inning, you want to address that immediately and stop it. Or if they say, well, the video shows this, grounds for ejection. Histrionic gestures, the old Phil Wells, I think was his name, the Braves AA manager who army crawls behind the mound and lobs a rosin bag grenade towards the plate. Histrionic gesture. That's not the level that it starts at, clearly. Scooping dirt over the plate, kicking dirt, throwing their hat at your feet, launching their bat 30 feet in the air when you call strike 3 on them, stuff like that. Actions intended to ridicule. So performing the duties of an umpire, quote unquote, the old Earl Weaver where he gets behind the plate and starts signaling balls and strikes and calling a pitch or drawing your strike zone. Drawing a line in the dirt where they think the pitch crossed the plate at. Throwing equipment in disgust. Prolonged arguing. Contact with an umpire. Failure to comply with a reasonable order. I think the most recent one here was who was it? It was Jerry West. No. It was Jerry Davis.
Adrian Beltre.
Yep, Jerry
Adrian
Davis.
Beltre. I couldn't think of the B. Adrian
Yep.
Beltre, where he said basically get out of the triangle, move the batter's circle back to its original location. He didn't. He got ejected. Hey, coach, it's they're arguing, they're prolonged arguing. Coach, it's time to return to your coach's box or return to the dugout. I can't think of many other reasonable orders or reasonable requests. They do list it as an order, not a request. So basically, when you tell them you need to do this, and at that point, if they fail to comply, they're at risk of being ejected. Foreign substance, which luckily we don't deal with a ton at the lower levels, intentionally throwing out a batter, and fighting. Those are all the standards of removal from the game.
Hey, Connor.
Yeah.
First and foremost, I want, and we can kind of open this up for discussion here a little bit. I'm not active. I do read things in Facebook forums or Umpire Empire, and the one that for some reason keeps making its rounds is the question about a coach bringing a rule book on the field. Your thoughts?
Over time, my views on this has changed. As a younger umpire, you get 2 steps out of the dugout and I'm dumping you, But I was young, dumb, and something else. So I wasn't going to put up with it. Now it's more of a, hey, you can't bring that out here, right? Or put that away before you come talk to me. And I'm going to address it, right? That's a reasonable request. Put your rule book back in the dugout before you come out here. I think that's a reasonable order. I'm probably, if he gets out there and starts to use it or reference it, I'm probably going to eject him. Because now he's basically saying you don't know the rules. He's trying to show me the rule. Now, if he comes out and says, hey, Connor, yada, 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 I think you're misapplying this rule. I have a rule book in the dugout. Maybe it's a different story. I don't know. I think it's a situation, it's a case-by-case basis. It also depends on the level and the rule.
My opinion, and Russ, I'm very curious to hear yours as well. There was an ejection. I want to say it was Aaron Boone got tossed by Adam Hammery. And the video is Adam takes his mask off and he's like waving his arms like, Aaron, stay in the dugout, stay in the dugout. And he's trying to keep him in the dugout. If a coach wants to come out and ask a question or something like that, that's great. But I think that, trying to get the coach to put the rule book away is reasonable. Because and especially the higher, and it depends on the level, but we have protests at certain levels, and if you protest it. I guess that's I'm going to try to get the coach back in the dugout, or at least get the rule book back in the dugout before I address anything on it. And just for everybody else here, I did put in the chat, there is a supplemental note that is found in the NCAA manual that I did put for everyone to read, and it will be in the email handout that we send out here later today as well.
I think it goes back to actions intended to ridicule.
Yep, I agree with that.
Why is he bringing the rule book out?
You have no idea what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. In that instance where he's arguing the call, actions intended to ridicule. Now, if he comes out between innings to ask a question on a rule interpretation, that's a different story. Says, hey, I got a question about a rule I wanted to ask you, and he has a rule book with him. Okay. But if it's after a call that I've made, it's probably going to be pretty automatic for that note at home.
Yep.
Throwing equipment in disgust. I think we have a little bit of leeway here with this one. It depends on it depends on the situation. Are they disgusted with themselves? Are they just in disgust with me? Sometimes it's a, hey, pick it up. I ran a guy who umpires in an amateur game because he spiked his helmet after he got backpicked at first. And I told him to pick it up, and then he kicks it off the fence, which is, it bounced. It was probably near the coach's box, and he kicked it off the fence, which was across the warning track. Failure to comply with the reasonable order. Wasn't going to eject him for throwing his helmet, but did eject him for kicking it for the second act. So these are all.
I had an ejection in town ball one time. Pop up to the third baseman and he's pissed at himself. And he fires the bat toward his own dugout. And his on deck guy just got missed. And so I ejected him, and the manager came out to me and said, "That was awful quick ejection, wasn't it?" I said, "Ask the guy that just almost saved his life by ducking. He doesn't want to play with him anymore."
So when it comes to ejections, we have 4 steps. And these are suggested steps. Sometimes you skip a step or two. Like Jake put in there, sometimes there's an immediate ejections, right? Skip all 3. So first off, ignore, acknowledge, warn, eject. If you follow those guidelines, you're going to be set pretty well and going to have a pretty good reason for an ejection, right? It's going to be hard for them to argue why they got ejected when you ignored, you acknowledged, you warned, and eject. And this is primarily for like balls and strikes type stuff, right? I'm going to ignore them until they distract me. When they distract me, or I feel like I've had enough, I'm going to say, "Hey, I hear you guys," right? I'm going to acknowledge that they're talking. Sometimes it's simply looking in their direction, right? Do whatever you need to do to acknowledge it. Then this is your warning for XYZ. And I'm a big proponent of being very clear. This is your warning. If you continue, you will be ejected. And if they continue, you eject them. It's helped me out in some situations where I ejected a player in an amateur game because I said, if you continue arguing, you will be ejected. And he kept going, and I eject him. And then his teammate says, "What the hell are you doing? He told you to stop or you're going to be ejected. And you didn't stop." So his teammates were on my side because they heard me say that. They're like, "Dude, he gave you an option there." Now, in most games, teammates aren't going to be on your side because it's probably one of their better players that they want to keep in the game. But if you follow this list for 99% of issues, you're going to avoid having to eject players and coaches. Sometimes you skip step 1 through 3. Sometimes it's bad enough that you don't ignore them. You just acknowledge it right away. I've had I had a partner who a coach sprinted from the third base coach's box after a double play. He was on a dead sprint from the third base coach's box to my partner in position B. And before he got there, he was ejected because he came out on a dead sprint. I was cool with it. And he spikes his helmet, and I was able to just walk out there as a plate umpire. In this situation, as when we have an intense discussion as a partner, we need to be aware of it, and we need to kind of, I think the term most people use is rodeo clown, right? I'm going to get closer and closer to that situation the more intense it gets, because then I can step in and move the coach back or address the coach and get them redirected back to their area, whether it's their coach's box or their dugout. But also because I know what's going on. And when he does get ejected, I can step in and tell him, "Coach, you've been ejected. It's time to leave." And I can allow my partner to then walk away because I'm now engaging in that conversation.
Is the NCAA rule, when you have a warning, it must be a written warning? However,
No.
That's only NFHS that requires a written warning.
You actually have to write it down and hand it to him. Basically like a warning for speeding.
Yeah.
no, you don't have to hand it to them.
Oh.
You
Oh.
just have to write it down on your card and say, this is your official written warning.
Oh boy.
I mean, I write down my verbal warnings on my card.
I write down all
Yeah.
warnings.
Yeah, I write. Yeah.
Because I want to be able to come back in my ejection report and say, in the top of the third inning with this player at bat, coach said XYZ, I issued a warning.
Yes.
So definitely write it down. When you have an ejection, write down as much. Like first thing I eject him, I take out my book, find a pen and paper, and start writing down what they say. Because I want as much of the actual words as I can get, because I can't paraphrase. I can't put words that I think they said. I have to put in the stuff that they exactly said. That's what my assigner wants.
Just what every assigner wants.
Yeah. Two points to this. Okay. Umpires, each person should handle their stuff. Okay. A base umpire should not be ejecting a batter for arguing balls and strikes or for saying something to their partner. Okay. Those are the type of ejections that as supervisors, mentors, I mean, if someone ejects a coach or a player that is at position B and the whole incident is going in at or the whole situation is occurring around home plate, that's really hard to defend as a supervisor. I frankly, I don't even know how you would defend that. And then the second thing is, if you eject somebody and there is profanity, so if you eject someone in a game that is assigned by our association, your game report goes to Brett Sano. Brett then forwards the reports to myself and Mark Zolny. We review them and basically store them in the file to see if there's anything that we can teach, improve, things like that. If there's foul language used, I don't want stars. I don't want, just a letter. Write word for word, spell it out, what they said. Profanity and all.
The big thing when it comes to ejections, situations that lead to ejections as partners, don't be the partner standing there in shallow right field while your partner ejects somebody and has to walk back and forth 3 times before they finally yell at the assistant coach to come get the head coach. And then the partner doesn't find out about the ejection until after the game. I've been in that situation. It's not fun. Be a good partner. I think that a lot of that comes down to handling your own stuff, but knowing when your partner can use a little bit of help too. Don't let the dugout burn the house down at your plate umpire on balls and strikes. Don't be afraid to step in and tell them to knock it off. Be a good partner and help each other out of situations that warrant it. And then eject and walk away. If you eject them and then you walk away, now they're the aggressor following you. Everybody knows, everybody in the field sees them follow you, yelling at you, screaming obscenities at you while you're trying to get away from them. Let them do that if they want to. As a partner, make sure you get in there and help direct traffic. But if you're the ejecting umpire, eject and walk away. So, cool. All right, I got one more slide. This is going to show you balls and strikes, and then we'll cut it off for today. See if it plays audio.
Yeah, you have
the lighting and so on.
You get that long.
Yeah.
I mean, you're seeing the rain that's in. You're all seeing it. It's catching the edge a little. But a bit this year.
Yeah.
Hey. Uh-oh. He tossed Shelton. Derek Shelton just got ejected, and John Tumpane said, "You stay inside." And Tumpane had heard enough.
The part I really like about Tumpane is he tells him where the pitch is at. He holds up a stop sign saying stop, basically warning him, right? He ejects him, and when Shelton comes out, he's not demonstrative. He talks to him. He explains what he has. And he from outside looking in, he looks like he's very cool and collected, right? He addresses it, has to eject him on a pitch that I don't know why you're arguing anyways. From that angle of the field at least. But he's under control, right? The manager is screaming, pointing, using histrionic gestures, arguing balls and strikes, leaving his position. And we are very calm. And he does a really good job of that. Like you look, he's in 3 or 4 ejection videos, like this one down here with Aaron Boone. He's standing there with his hands at his side, and Boone's got his hands up in the air yelling at him. He does a really good job of staying calm in an intense situation. So, anybody have any questions? We can cover how to grant time in the definition section because it's in there too. So, cool. That's all I've got.
Thanks,
for a great
guys.
game.
Yeah, thank you all very much. I appreciate it. If you have questions, feel free to shoot me an email or drop something in the chat. Other than that, have a great day.